Hello, Anne. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so happy to talk to you. We were just chatting for a minute before we went live about how this seems like it's been a little bit of time in the making from when you and I first connected to our schedules aligned for us to chat today. So I'm excited. Spring is springing. It's Women's History Month. Lots of exciting things going on. How have you been since we chatted last?
Richard, I've been great. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's so funny how this year is already flying by. It's hard to
Yeah.
believe we're already in March.
You're right. It's crazy. And I'm excited because I like the spring and I like all of the fun things that come along with this time of year, like graduations and it's a lot of fun. I love it. It's great. Like all the new beginnings, right? I guess
Yes,
it's a little bit of a metaphor, but spring is a new beginning, right? So I'm really
most
excited about that.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm excited to chat with you today about accountability works. But before we get into accountability works, let's get into Anne a little bit. Would you mind just giving us, a little bit of background about you?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to.
Sure.
And it's so funny you mentioned it being spring. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm in spring of my professional career. I'm going through a bit of I like to call an awakening.
Okay.
So I really think of my career in chapters. And
Hmm.
so I take a moment to reflect back, and then I'll bring you to where I sit today. But
Sure.
the last 20 years, I've had the great opportunity of working for some amazing companies in
Mm-hmm.
varying roles that have spanned healthcare
Mm-hmm.
to IT to business strategy. And then what I would say I'm really most proud of is the last 10 years,
Mm.
where I've had varying people leadership opportunities. And I mentioned this awakening, which has really been for the last year. I have been in partnership with the team at Accountability Works.
Right.
And it's really been the culmination of those experiences through my professional career
Mm.
that have really aligned me around what I'm most passionate about, which is human potential.
Yeah, yeah. I love that we're talking about spring awakenings, right? It's so
Yeah.
fun. And you mentioned for a second, the C-level roles. You have a very extensive background in
Mhm.
C-level coaching, in C-level consulting. I feel like you're being a little modest here. Talk to us a little bit about some of your experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I am not the typical people leader in terms of having a linear path. Although I
Mm,
say that to say what's so funny is my background, I'm finding to become more and more the path that you're seeing emerging people leaders
yeah.
undertaking. I say that to say I got a master's in health administration, and from
Just
there
like
worked.
I have one too. Yep, very
I know,
similar.
right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
part of how you and I connected was
Correct.
with
Yeah.
our similarities there. But
Sure.
took what was interesting, and it was this I would almost say seed that was planted when I was in graduate school. I
Hmm.
took an organizational behavior class, was my most favorite,
Yeah.
and really just really connected to me this idea of thinking about how organizations are really a compilation of people and what makes people work well together, and especially thinking about that within a healthcare context.
Okay.
So flash forward, I worked in consulting for two
Mm.
years. um, Very common in consulting. I stepped in thinking I was going to be taking a healthcare role, and it's about billable hours, right? So
Right.
the first project I took was,
Renewing.
yeah, was a system implementation, and I was doing this work around process reengineering,
Sure.
which I wasn't even sure what that was, but I dove in. And what really spoke to me again, this common thread, was seeing how we could remove friction from the work that people were doing. But
Mm.
then what was so interesting to me is how we oftentimes needed to and should put emphasis around the change management.
Mm.
Oftentimes, we would see opportunities of let's say, removing unnecessary steps, but
Sure.
folks were very much tied to those steps. So
Right.
really, long story short, I started finding myself really, really gravitating towards those interactions of how to get people feeling most connected to their work, I worked 10 years for Kaiser Permanente, a big
Yes. Big
uh,
health system. Yeah.
big health
Yeah.
system, although headquartered in California, has a presence throughout the US,
Oh, sure.
and was there through the implementation of the electronic medical record.
Hmm.
And again, you're going to notice as we talk this common theme where
Yeah.
I was charged with roles in support of aligning the organization to embrace technology. But what kept me ticking was, how did we ready the organization to
Right.
really make this pivot? So from there, then my first role, which is again unique in a lot of ways, was in an HR technology
Hmm.
capacity.
Hmm.
But again, I really worked my way through the people function. And I've had the great opportunity of working early stage all the way through to enterprise. I've held roles leading people operations,
Mm.
as well as being the head of people, which was
Sure.
a senior role I held when I was working within industry.
There's so much I want to unwind there. Like, everything you're talking about, like we're so like we're so like kindred, right? So the role of technology, you
Mhm.
talk about removing friction from processes. You talk about though, but people are sometimes emotionally tied to steps. So there's the change management aspect. And
Yeah,
I know that you are a student of design thinking. I'm also a student of design thinking. So lots for us to get to. Give
yeah.
us 10-second elevator pitch on accountability works as an organization.
Yeah. So Accountability Works is a consultative practice. My partners started it about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Our founding partner began Accountability Works literally. The nexus of it was during 2008. She was working in real estate
Okay. As the
and
market
was
was declining.
yeah,
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
market
Yeah.
was declining, and she
Sure.
began her career as a real estate agent, and her background is in engineering
Okay.
and process, very much process oriented.
Mm.
So Allie, our founder, she um, on her own really came up with this idea of putting together accountability meetings with her fellow agents.
Interesting.
And was, while the market, and especially here in California and in the
Mm.
Bay Area, was really struggling, her team was continuing to meet their targets.
Sure.
And so the founder of the real estate firm said, Allie, what are you doing? You know, this is this time of tremendous volatility
Yeah.
and concern. And so what she found, and it came out of a need and an opportunity, was how critical it was for her colleagues to come together to
Right.
really anchor around set, as she called them, commitments, and
Hmm.
to check in with each other and
Mm.
to talk about where they were experiencing wins and where they were experiencing challenges, and they really
Nice.
supported each other through this process.
Sure.
So
Sure.
flash forward, she came to realize that her passion was really around accountability, and she
Yeah.
really applied her engineering mindset and really put forth a whole practice
Mm.
around a tool set that enables over a 12-week horizon how
Oh,
to
cool.
really go from setting a vision all the way through to identifying key commitments and key
Mm.
checkpoints throughout that 12-week.
Mm.
So flash forward,
Yeah.
I meet Allie, and she was in the early stages of this business. We were both parents of
Sure.
preschoolers.
Okay.
So we kept in touch. And as I was coming to terms with the fact that I was really ready to go out on my own, I reached
Yeah.
out to Allie. And I really did it more from a mentoring standpoint. I
Mm.
said,
Yeah,
Allie,
you were looking to help her. Yeah.
I was looking,
Yeah.
I said, hey, Allie, I've loved watching what you've been doing with your
Sure.
company.
Your rise. Yeah.
And I'm seeing, how accountability or lack thereof
Yeah.
is really this impediment right now. And at the
Sure.
time when she and I initially connected, it was 2022. Organizations, and in fact, the one that I was in was really struggling. We had the peak of boom here in the Valley in tech,
Yeah.
and then organizations were really shifting
Yeah. Definitely
to some
seeing it.
over
Yeah.
hiring.
Yeah.
I myself was impacted by that. So long story short, what started as me wanting some coaching on how I
Sure.
could start my own really became Allie sharing with me that she and her other partner were contemplating taking what was an individual and small group practice into the workplace.
Mm,
So long story short, we put our heads together and over the course of 2023 built out Accountability at Scale, which is a practice that's really focused on the workplace.
yes, yes. Accountability, and it's an interesting word, right? It's a
Isn't it?
loaded word.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talk about accountability in the workplace. We talk about challenges and accountability. I have a strong product development background, as I think you know. And in the product world, you often talk about accountability without authority. So,
Right.
you're accountable to get something done, but you don't have authority over the
Yeah.
resources that get the
Yeah.
work done. Um, Talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges
Yeah.
associated with cultures of accountability.
Yeah. I mean, this is really, Richard, one of my favorite topics,
Mm,
honestly. And it's so funny to your point about the synergies and you and I
yeah,
connecting, because I
absolutely.
too, because of the way that I came into HR through technology, right? I
Mm,
came in through HRIS,
right,
product focus.
right.
Um, I love the language that you're using because I do think accountability, especially today, is thrown around a lot in the
Yes.
workplace.
Oh, it's
I
it's
think
maybe even overused as a word, right?
right,
I mean, yeah,
the
yeah,
buzzword,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I won't
absolutely.
even go so far as to say recently, Harvard Business Review released some stats that 50% of managers resist holding their people accountable,
Mm,
yet 72% of people say if they were held accountable, their
sure.
performance would improve. So it's this elusive
Yeah,
uh, topic that's out there. We say we want it,
yeah,
yet we resist it. And oftentimes when, especially in the workplace, when we hear it, and I've done workshops where you mention it and you viscerally see people cringe,
yeah.
right? It's
Accountability. Yeah, yeah,
this punitive sort of thing.
sure,
And what I would say, and I really want to lean into the language that you used, when we talk about accountability, what we're really looking at, and we really get to the root of the word, which is the ability to align to what it is that you're hoping to achieve. And in
mm,
the workplace, that alignment is a collective.
sure.
So one of the key threads for me in terms of seeing organizations who I see that really thrive, it really comes down to having engaged teams.
Sure.
So this is, I see myself as an organizational scientist in
I was
terms of
gonna
the role.
say, yeah, you're a student of organizations,
Right,
clearly.
right.
Yes, yes.
And what I will tell you when I've seen it successful, and so what I'm going to define for you to get to the root of this is when I've seen it successful and when I've seen it absent.
Okay.
And when I've seen it, I'll start with the absence. When I've seen it absent, you see that you've got an endless list of to-dos.
Mm,
You have lots and lots of meetings on the calendar. You have the blame game,
mhm.
right? A task doesn't get done, and it's like, well, Richard didn't do his part, so I couldn't do my part.
Right.
You see time is we're unable to keep up,
Yep.
shifting priorities. Then you see those teams, and especially, and I want to lean into our both of our design backgrounds, the product teams,
Right.
where they just there's an elegance to it,
Sure.
right? They're able to come together. They're able to work with that Scrum model. They're able to
It's what they're taught. It's what, yeah, absolutely.
right.
That Scrum model becomes their entire working agreement, right?
Yep. But the
Yep.
working agreement is based on a shared understanding of the why.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's oftentimes what's missing. And in
Mm,
particular in organizations today, our middle managers are pinched more so than they've ever been,
yes.
especially in these flexible work arrangements, be it
Absolutely.
hybrid, be it remote,
Yes.
or when you're trying to pull everybody back into the office.
Yes.
And where I've seen where accountability falls down, and this is not to beat up on our middle managers, I'm incredibly empathetic, but oftentimes what they're missing is business context.
Yes. So they don't
They
understand the vision. They don't
don't
understand,
understand the
and we
vision.
we want to kind of, you know, crap on them, for lack of a better word, right? I've been in certain many organizations where, oh, middle management is weak and, they need more training and they need more this and but they need to be held more accountable. But to your point, so often the vision and the business context is not shared with them for the idea of like, well, knowledge is power and we have to keep it all at the top of the
Right,
organization. So
right.
they're at such an unfair advantage, right?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I will say this.
Disadvantage, unfair
This
disadvantage.
is
Sorry.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I
Yeah.
will say then is, so then what do you do? And
Right.
so now I want to talk to you about with the pandemic, which was an incredibly, I mean, my goodness, we're all still
Oh, sure.
processing,
Sure.
right? The aftermath. But for me, it was this amazing opportunity, and I had to anchor my way through. I was leading people functions
Right.
through the mix of this time. For all of us, all of our job descriptions changed.
Sure.
We didn't have a playbook anymore. I
Nope.
mean, we
Out
were
the window.
all
Yep.
frontline.
Yep.
And what that provided for me is this opportunity to really observe
Hmm.
and to see, in real time. And this comes to when we talk about accountability, we talk about observation without judgment.
Right.
And this was something that I really connected with Ali on. So for me, when I was observing my middle managers, we were all in the same boat, but I found those that were able to really mobilize and empower teams. They were incredibly inquisitive. They
Mm.
asked all kinds of questions and they were masterful at networking up and down and across and down the organization.
Mm.
And this was without prompting. So I agree with you, and I'm empathetic that oftentimes, so you'll notice with me, it's a series of ands.
Yes.
Should senior leadership be cascading? Most definitely.
Yes.
Yes, they need to be doing that. But what if they're not?
Hmm.
And what I'm saying to you is the middle managers that I've seen very successful ask those questions. They may ask their leader, they have great relationships with their
With
peers.
parallel. Yep. Yep.
And so that's a big part. So then applying that in our accountability work small model, accountability at scale, this
Mm.
is really about how you scale accountability through the organization, is
Mm.
really sharpening those skills of managers. And we have the benefit, my goodness, now more than ever, with the technologies that are available in terms of project planning. We've got tools like Asana,
Sana,
we've
Monday. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
all of those. What they do a masterful job is the tracking of the what, but what we need to empower our managers is how. And the
Hmm.
how really comes down to how you build those relationships, how you network, how you understand. And now I'm going to flash back to the pandemic,
Right.
understanding what everybody was experiencing. We were in an extreme crisis and trauma that we were having to navigate our organizations through.
Absolutely.
And then I will say, the frontline in organizations, I'm incredibly empathetic to our healthcare workers,
Hmm.
our teachers, but I got to tell you, our HR professionals, and most notably our benefits and total rewards leaders, these folks were frontline in the organization. So
Absolutely.
we were dealing with a macro crisis and then the micro
Micro.
crisis
Yep.
of folks within organizations. And we were all struggling. There was a time there was no playbook. We
Right.
were all,
Everybody's making it up as they went along. Yeah.
we were
Absolutely.
all
Yep.
making it up.
Yep.
And oh, by the way, some of us were getting COVID along the way
Right.
and needing
Or
to keep our
or
organization
dealing with loved
going,
ones who got
or
it,
loved
or
ones.
yeah, whatever else. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was chatting with a CEO last week of a pretty big company, couple of hundred employees, 100 million in revenue. So, enterprise
Yeah.
organization. And we were specifically talking about the shifting work environments. And we were talking about him trying to motivate people to think a little bit about the RTO, right? The dreaded RTO, the return to office, and the philosophies of tying it to meaningful events. So whether those be planning events or community events, and not just sort of like random Tuesdays or Thursdays, or mandating this notion of like, well, every Tuesday and Thursday you have to come in, but
Mhm.
trying to think a little bit about like when people do come in, we're going to tie it to something of significance, like a planning event where we're going to talk about strategy, or we're going to try to disseminate context through the organization. Do you have specific advice, Anne, for those that are kind of struggling, especially in these shifting work environments?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I don't use the term return to office, and
Nice.
I
I
also
hate it, so I'm glad you don't
yeah,
use it. Yeah, yeah.
and I will also say I don't use hybrid, although I know that's very
It's a very
commonplace. What
common term. Yeah, yeah,
Same thing with remote. What
yeah.
I'm really looking at, so to answer your question, and I love where he is going, is this idea of flexible work.
Flexible. Yes.
It's flexible work, and it is exactly to his point. It's leaning into those moments that matter.
Hmm.
And again, I'm going to lean back to my the design
Design
thing,
thinking. Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I will attribute, what was incredibly influential. One of the many companies that I worked for was Salesforce,
Hmm.
and they were really, really early days. I mean, we're hearing it now everywhere, but this idea of aligning our stakeholders, and
Sure.
really, when you think about stakeholders, it's not only customers and partners, it's also our employees.
Right.
And that as we thought about the employee journey, we were really taking much more of a product view
Sure.
in terms of those interaction points. So we both have that product management background.
Right.
So to that end, when you think about those moments that matter, it's exactly, I think, where he was leaning
Leaning
into.
towards. Yeah.
It's maybe in the beginning of the year.
Right.
You bring teams
Right.
together for planning,
Kickoffs and yep.
kickoffs.
Yep.
It is for key celebrations.
Hmm.
Maybe you've reached a really important milestone.
Sure. Like a
Um,
customer go live or
Customer
something.
go
Yep.
live.
Yep.
It's those types of things. And this is some of the consulting I've done with organizations. The
Mm.
pendulum has swung really, really hard in both directions. I've seen companies and worked, pretty exclusively in the tech arena that are remote, that are no longer allocating budget for any travel whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think that's problematic.
Yeah. I would
Same
agree.
goes, same goes. There was a company that reached out. I won't say who it was, but I found there was an irony that they were wanting me to help them do some employee experience work, but they wanted me on site 100% of the time.
Wow.
And so I was saying, again, it's this rigidity of thinking.
Yes.
It goes back to it's the world in which we're operating is oriented around flexibility.
Hmm.
And when you think of all of the tools that we have available to us,
Yes.
it then gets back to being really thoughtful and deliberate about how and when we bring people together. Do we want them sitting in the office checking email?
Right.
Now, that's
Or
something.
sitting in the office on Teams calls. Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So it's
Yeah.
really, it does take planning, it does take coordination, it does take intentionality. But yes, exactly to where the CEO is going, where I coach leaders and organizations, is to really map out, again, journey mapping, right? What
Right.
are those moments that matter, and how then to align bringing teams together. Another area that I also look at is, it may not all be about bringing people into headquarters.
Right.
It may be about, now I'm talking, I have some experience in larger enterprise organizations.
Regional.
Maybe,
Regional. Yep.
there you
Yep.
go. Or maybe you bring people to a call center,
Right.
right? Where you bring those leaders together to have time with those employees, as an example. And then I even go back, the call center model, which I found funny, was that when had to be remote, people were able to work from home,
Hmm.
but there's been a lot of emphasis of wanting to bring everybody back to co-locate, and it's questioning the why. It's
Yes.
questioning the why. A book that I think I just finished this weekend that is so timely with our conversation is The Friction Project, and it's
Oh,
written by two professors out of Stanford.
interesting. Don't
And
know this one. Yeah. Thank you.
add it to
Thank
your
you.
list.
Yeah.
Professor Sutton and Rao, and
Okay.
they really talk about this concept of friction and
Mm.
how and where we can both lean in to removing friction, and also from the perspective of innovating, where we want to have deliberate stop gates in the
Mm.
process.
Mm.
And so where I go back to on this is, it's not to say that everything should be digitized,
Right.
but it's also to say that we shouldn't resist that digitization either, but it's being much more thoughtful and deliberate about how and where friction is in the system, and how it may be really blocking interaction. And then I get back to that CEO. How you do that is with thoughtful intentionality and bringing people together,
Yeah.
because what we are all starved for is connection right now. And we
Absolutely.
do need to be able to have those opportunities to connect with our colleagues.
I love the intentionality that you just talked about. And it's so fascinating. You talked about flexibility, right? And to me, this culmination of like I think in Venn diagrams. So um I
I can
see
play
this,
there.
yeah, flexibility, accountability, culture, technology, all of these intersections. You as a student and an expert of organizational behavior, right? Of industrial psych, this future of this intentionality and this careful intersection of we want to be flexible, but we're going to hold you accountable,
Mm,
right? We want to have a culture, but at the same time, it can't be, like running roughshod here. Wait, there has to be
right.
some, there has to be intentionality to it. We have the technology, which continues to explode in what it offers us. But at the
Mhm,
same time, we have to be mindful about technology's role, right? and
mhm.
and 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 accountability at scale. I just this stuff you and I could talk about this forever, but I love this intersection that you
Yeah.
just described in what's happening in the workforce today.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, no, it's the time is now,
Yes.
and we are going, and it's funny, I'm a perpetual student. My undergraduate degree was in history,
Okay.
and it's so funny as I've navigated, folks have said, and for another time we can talk about the art,
Yeah.
humanities, but
Yeah, sure.
how have you had the career that you've had as having been a history major? And I said, I don't know that I would have been able to have had the career that I had
Without
if
this
that had
background.
not
Yeah.
been. And I will
Yes.
tell you in particular, it is what got me through COVID, because
Mm.
what I learned, and I'm going to date myself here, there were card catalogs. Like I knew how to do research.
I know
I
card
knew
catalogs.
how, yeah, right. I knew how to do that. And really, those skills are what we need today, because
Mm.
the future of work is now. I mean, we
Yes.
talked about these grandiose, pre-COVID, we were talking about it. But the reality is, we are going through a next iteration of
Sure.
what it means to be a workplace.
Yes.
And just like we moved from the factory model, we are
Right.
moving away from the center of the workplace being headquarters. We're
Right.
moving away from that.
Yes.
And again, this is why change management,
Is so
is
powerful. Yep. Yeah.
so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because we're resisting it. There are artifacts that we hold on to when we think about
Yes.
the office. And this is where I say, when we talk about return to office, that's not the right question. The
Right.
right question is, from a flexibility lens, when, where, and how do we need to do the work?
Mm.
And then this ties to job descriptions.
Sure.
This ties headcount planning. But it's really much more about what we do, why we do it, and how we do it than where we do it.
Right. Right.
I know my colleagues that are in real estate, especially corporate real
Oh
estate,
gosh,
they
I
hear
feel
that,
for them. I
right?
feel for them. I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. But then to your point, there are ways that you can do co-working and
There you go.
other ways that, large office spaces don't need to be occupied by just one company all the
There
time.
you go.
Yeah, we can rotate. They can
Yeah.
share things. It could be so much more communal in that way. So,
Yeah.
Andy, as you know, this is a podcast that is dedicated to women in leadership.
Yes.
So I would love to get your perspective a little bit on some of your challenges, on some of your experiences. Human resources is an area where we do see
Mhm.
women in leadership
Yeah.
roles, right, relative to other areas. Talk to us a little bit about, some of your, I guess, just let's just say your feelings about, yourself in leadership as a woman in leadership and just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So as I said, the last 10 years, I
Mm.
have spent exclusively working for tech companies. And so
Right.
when I would look around the company,
You don't see
you
a
know,
lot of women in leadership
not a
positions.
lot of
Yeah.
women, but then to your
Yeah.
point, you
Yeah.
get into HR, and
Right.
I will say, this is where I will say, what you see in HR oftentimes is women and underrepresented populations.
Right.
And oftentimes you'll see, the DE&I efforts, not always, but we'll be reporting up, through HR.
Right.
So oftentimes what you will see is we end up being a cohort within an ecosystem that may not look just like us.
Sure.
And what I will say, and it's interesting. So as I was navigating my various people leadership roles in tech, I
Okay.
was also mother to. I have one daughter. She's turning 16 end of May.
Wow.
And I was getting to observe, and again, perpetual student as
Yes.
I was thinking through. So I'm observing my daughter navigating through her educational career, and I'm in tech, and I'm
Yes.
observing why are we, because again, I'm in the people function. Why are we struggling, when it's coming to both women and underrepresented populations for these various roles? And then I'm a mom to a daughter
Right.
living here in the Area. So what I start seeing is that, and then I'm a voracious reader, right? So I'm
Right.
reading and I'm seeing,
Clearly.
right? And what we find is where the drop off happens is in middle school.
Yeah.
So, and it's,
Yes.
and it's actually happening earlier and earlier. And I had this, but I'm gonna answer this in a very personal way, and then I'll anchor it back to the workplace.
Sure.
My daughter, when she was in third grade, we had our regular uh, check-in with her teacher.
Yeah, like a
And
parent teacher conference type.
parent teacher
Yeah.
conference,
Yeah.
there you go.
Sure.
And so, got lots of praise for her around her reading and her writing. And she had a male teacher, and I know meant really well, but he said, math, I just don't think is her thing.
Her thing. Yeah.
Here
Sure.
I am, I'm working in tech. Like,
Right.
why are we struggling? Why are girls
Struggling
in
with
our
math. Yeah.
organization? Why
STEM,
are most of
etc.
them
Yep. Yep.
right? And so I said to him, I said, third grade, it's a little early to be
Yeah.
writing her
Like
off as it
writing her
relates.
off and telling, yeah, she's might as
Yeah,
well pick a career in the humanities
right,
now because yeah.
right. Yeah, and she was going, the Bay Area is a very, academic,
Sure.
very,
Yeah.
environment. And so this really stuck with me. And I, mentioned it to him, and,
Sure.
I did it in a joking way. And then, it stayed on my mind. And then flash forward, I ended up sending my daughter to an all-girls middle school.
Oh,
Called Julia Morgan.
middle school. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
it
Yeah.
sits on the what was Mills College campus here in Oakland, and
Okay.
it's only middle, and it's a all
Very
girls.
interesting. I've never heard of that. I've never heard
Yeah,
of single sex middle school. Certainly high
yeah.
schools, but not
No,
middle
only
schools.
middle.
Interesting.
And the
Yeah.
reason for this, and the founders, so we were aligned philosophically, right? Was
Yeah,
this
sure.
idea that middle school is where girls drop off,
Yeah,
where they
absolutely.
get,
And
and
we've
hers
seen many
started in third
studies
grade.
show that that's where the
Yep.
drop off is. Yep. Yep.
And so I just that third grade conference stuck with me.
Mm,
And she was going to a highly selective school. She was getting good grades, but I just noticed her. We were trying to build her up. I'm like,
yeah.
wanting
Confidence, really
to engage,
important at that
all of
age.
that.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yep.
So flash forward, she goes to the middle school, and it just happened to time with COVID, right? So,
Mm, poor thing. Yeah.
but we were so fortunate that she had that environment, because
Right.
while a lot of my friends, the academics had dropped off, hers stayed, she was pacing. And what was interesting, Richard, that really stuck with me is she still gravitates and is, with history and English,
Sure.
but there's a tenacity to her when it comes to math and science.
Interesting.
And now she's at a co-ed high school,
Okay.
and science again, I tend to be a strength finder, but it doesn't come as naturally to her, but she's very tenacious, goes
Okay.
into her teachers. And I will tell you, as a parent, the proudest moment I had when I got her feedback was her teacher said the tenacity. She goes in, she asks questions.
Right.
It's not about the grade,
Right.
but that experience in middle school,
Helped her. Yeah.
it really flipped a switch. So to the point, and why I say this about within the workplace is, even still in this day, and if it's happening in Berkeley, right? Like, I'm living in a very progressive area, and this teacher was lovely. He meant well,
Sure.
but it's the unconscious bias. And I mean,
Right.
and I'm thinking, you can translate this and imagine this of all different demographics.
Yes.
So I go back to, it's so important to have representation,
Mm,
to have mentoring.
mm-hmm.
And so for me, a big part, because of the work that I did with the school, and the school was, I'm so thankful for it for a bunch of reasons, but they did something where they were teaching their students how to interview. And I thought that's so funny for
That's a
16
great skill, though. That's a great skill. Yep.
and people say this about my daughter, how poised she is in speaking, but what it was about was getting them to be confident and comfortable
Yes.
talking about
Talking.
themselves and their accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And so then flash forward when my daughter returned to co-ed education, because, she's a teenager, right?
Right.
She wanted to go back to co-ed. She had her different, why did you move
Why'd
me?
you make me move? My friends,
Right.
da da da. Yeah, yeah.
But after that she got the positive feedback around science, she said to me, and she sees it in class, where she notices the difference on boys being called on versus girls.
Girls. Yep.
And I don't know, this to me wasn't about wanting her to be a STEM major
Right.
or,
No, I get that. No, you're not like
yeah,
pushing to be like, you need to go to Caltech and you need to major in
no.
chemistry. And yeah, no, yeah. Yep.
But
Yep.
but this idea that we already start tracking
Mm-hmm.
children, and especially, and again, it's not exclusive to boys and girls,
Right.
but it's this idea that certain people are good at certain things and others aren't. And so for me, where this comes back into the workplace and in these organizations in which I've operated, the mentoring is so important.
Yes.
The mentoring is so important. And oftentimes we may not, especially the smaller organizations in which I worked,
They
you may
don't
not have the
recognize it.
representation.
Yeah.
So you got to go outside your organization.
Right.
And I'm all about the coaching and mentoring and networking. And it's so important.
Sure.
Resourcing is important of support across the board, but it's super important for people to see folks who look just like them and
Yes.
who have their lived experience. Because while
Yes.
I may mean well, but I can't necessarily give that same perspective as somebody else who's been there.
I went to a venture conference a couple of months ago at Harvard that was called Girls into VC, and it was put on
Mm,
by girls for girls who want to get into venture capital.
I
And
got
the
to write this
point,
down.
sure, yeah. And the point that you made about finding people that look like me, right? So I was thrilled that I was the only person in the room that was not a 20-something-year-old female, right? I mean, there were a couple of us in the back, but the whole idea of like finding people who look like me who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in, right? This was fascinating to me.
Mm,
And just made me so excited for the future
mhm.
because these young women were like looking to find inspiration within each other, looking to find mentorship, and just trying to find people that look like them, to your point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly. And I have to say, Richard, and this is why I was excited to do your podcast.
Mm,
Also, it's an and. We need
right.
allyship.
And
We
yeah.
need allyship. And that I will say is, I'm all about opportunity, and I'm a perpetual optimist.
Right.
And that we need to be seeing is, and it goes back to this concept that we started the conversation around connection.
Right.
We've got to start connecting our communities
Hmm.
and having allyship. I think,
Yes.
yes, it's important to have representation. It's important to have mentors that look like you. And it's important the work that you're doing, where you're amplifying
Mm.
voices as well.
Thank you.
As well.
I so appreciate you saying that. I mentor, women in their 20s, and sometimes it's hard for us to kind of, find common ground sometimes, right? And but at the end of the day, I just feel like if I can amplify or remove a barrier or just help
Mhm.
them learn from a mistake that I made so they don't make the same mistake. And
That's
I've
it.
seen some of these young women really come into their own from a confidence perspective, right? Which
That's
is so
exactly it.
rewarding. Absolutely. It's
That's
just so
exactly
rewarding,
it. And
you know?
you can see, here's an area, and again, I'm quoting because this book is top of mind because I
Yeah, I
just
love it.
finished the Friction Project, this component focus. And they talk about it in terms of the workplace, where it's
Sure.
easy to get overly fixated on your silo of work
Right.
without the unintended impacts
Hmm.
across the organization. But what I would say when it comes to networking also is coming in with an open mind. And when I coach and mentor, this is what
Right.
I talk about,
Right.
is having a diverse network of mentors, because
Mm.
Richard may see something that I don't see in the
Right.
workplace.
Right.
You might not agree with it.
Sure.
As the recipient, you may want
Right.
to change it,
Right.
but to not know it is a tripwire. It could be a tripwire in your career. It really could. And so that's
Absolutely. Yep.
I also feel, when folks ask me this, it's have an expansive network. Yes,
Right.
have people that look like you, but also expand. It's the same logic that I have in organizations. I say
Right.
have people more senior than you, have people more junior than
Junior.
you,
Yep.
have
Yep.
people who are peer to you, have people who look like you, and have people who don't look
Don't
like
look
you.
like you. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I love the fact that you were able to talk us through some of your personal inspiration here, and your daughter and how she inspired you. I have a daughter who is just graduating from college, so we're very
Amazing.
yeah,
Congratulations.
amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you. Very similar. She's a big reason why I did this show in the first place. I appreciate how you balance your professional endeavors and your personal endeavors. What's next, Anne? Talk to us about what are you most excited to kind of delve into next?
Yeah. Well, is this, professionally,
Well,
personally, both?
anywhere you want to take it. I'm happy to
Yeah.
hear either or.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you,
Or we'll go back to your and.
yeah, my aunt, right? So I'll tell you, I'll answer that both professionally and personally.
Great.
So professionally, I have to say, and I meant it when we started at the top of the call, this awakening
Yeah, I
of
love it.
being at where I am in my career and starting a new chapter. Because
Mhm.
I will tell you, my daughter, as I mentioned, she is a sophomore in high school, very motivated. She, has all kinds of interests,
I
and
love it.
the big milestone on the
What a
horizon is
great time to be where she is in her
right.
life. Yeah, yeah.
And what I will say, what I'm noticing that's happening is she inspires me.
Mm,
She celebrates me going out on my own. And so when we inspire each other is
that's so
she's got
cool.
passions that she's wanting to do. She inspires me because she's stretching outside her comfort zone, and then
Yeah,
she sees me stretching outside my comfort zone. So
awesome.
this is the macro level. The other area I have to say is one of the trends that I'm seeing is really, as I look in the workplace, is the 40 plus population. So I'm
Mhm.
not going to give my age, but I sit in that population, right? And what I'm seeing and why I'm so inspired in the work that I'm doing is, I will say 2024 is the year of women's health. I mean, I'm
Yes,
proclaiming it.
yes.
Uh,
Well,
Joe Biden
let's hope
proclaimed it.
so, right? I mean,
Joe Biden,
we're certainly starting to see a tide of trend towards the recognition of women's health, right? I
yeah.
mean, it's an election year, so that brings its own sort of
Yeah.
vulnerabilities. But yes, I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Well, I will tell you, wearing my and I'm gonna lean into my 20 years of organizational knowledge
Hmm.
here. So this is me, the integration and
Yeah.
intersectionality, how I look at the world. Why I am the perpetual optimist here is when I look at the workforce is aging. I
Yep.
mean, I'm telling you, if you've got, and I pulled some stats this morning because this was so important to me. When we look at the workplace, we've got 20% of the total workforce. These stats come from Media Health. So
Mm.
big fan of the work that Joanna Strober is doing.
Yeah.
What she denotes is 20% of the workforce is in menopause right now. So
Wow.
where am I going with this? Well, I'm going to
No,
tie,
no, you're talking about, yeah.
irrespective of what happens with the election, why this is something that all employers should care about and are
Yes.
starting to care about across
Yes.
all industries. And I'm going to look at my stats here because I don't want to get this wrong. 25% of the workforce is going to have symptoms for 15 years.
Right.
Because as Joanna frames and the great work that she's doing amongst many other in this space, we're looking at late 30s to 60
60. Yep.
of span. And what am I
Hmm.
saying? Age force is aging and people are
Yes.
staying in the workforce
Staying in
much
work,
longer,
staying in the workforce longer. So that
right?
perimenopausal to menopause to postmenopause, that's a long time frame, right? Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
long area.
Yep.
Now let's look at our manager community, which I'm very passionate about. 42% of them are women.
Mm.
And of that management community, 62% are 40 plus.
In that
So,
category.
so what
Yep.
I'm going to say is, if
Yes.
you're a CEO out there listening to this, you have to pay attention to this.
Yes.
You
You
have
can't.
to pay
Yes. You
attention to
can't just
this.
ignore it. Yep.
And that's where I'm saying I feel like we are turning a corner. And if you're seeing, what's happening within the VC community,
Hmm.
as you look at women's health initiatives and the
Hmm.
expansiveness of really thinking about what this means, there are so many reasons where we should be emphasizing this. But I know, my colleagues who are business people, this is a business
Yes.
impactful problem if we don't address it.
Absolutely. And hopefully we will. And I study, the VC market as much as you do, and women's health is an extremely important femtech and women's health is extremely important to me. We saw this explosion of companies that were willing to invest in women's health, women's technology. Then it very much plateaued and leveled off, right?
Mhm.
And every day when I'm encouraged to see it starting to climb back up again, right? Um, and I have to believe that some of that is in part due to the statistics that you just so eloquently, described to us. But I continue to hope so, like crossing finger every day that people are starting to continue to recognize the importance of this here, right?
You know what I would
Yeah,
say, and this, so you were asking me about why I'm hopeful and why I'm doing this work,
sure,
is to get the word out, to amplify it in
right,
that it has a workplace implication.
right,
While, as you know, my background, I came out of healthcare.
right.
Where I am so passionate about this is a workplace issue.
Yes,
Meaning if we don't
yes,
address it, it
yes,
will impact the bottom line. Now,
yes.
are there so many other reasons that we should be paying attention to this?
Of course,
Absolutely.
but you raise a very
Absolutely.
yes, yep, yep.
Absolutely. And then I'm gonna circle it back to where accountability really plays in the mix here. When we think about the workplace, it's about connection, not compliance.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about surveilling our employees.
Mm-hmm.
It's about giving them the tools
Yep.
to have motivated employees. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, having a Gen Z,
Yep.
daughter myself, and
Yep.
then
Yep. We both do. Yep.
we look at Gen Alpha, that's what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're looking for. And these are the skills, while I'm a hugely a proponent and fan of technology, they need to go hand in hand.
Yes.
We
Agreed.
need to be able to, and I want to use the language that you used earlier in our conversation. It's not only about holding others accountable, it's holding ourselves
Selves.
accountable.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's something that technology can't do for us. That's where I really say it's being clear of who you are,
Right.
what your values are, and
Yep.
making decisions through the lens of your values. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
ask what we're really oriented around, it's that. When you are aligned to your values, and I've seen this personally, I've seen this as a leader. When you're aligned to your values, you stick to your commitments. When there's dissonance, that's where you see disengagement. That's where you see friction.
Right.
And so it really comes back to that anchoring back to self, and then self to the community of which you're a part.
Decisions through the alignment of your values. I love it. Through the lens of the alignment of your values. I love that statement. And you're a delight. This has been a delight. Your passion and your energy is infectious. Thank you for taking time to chat with us today. Tell us your story about Accountability Works and all the wonderful things that you're focused on as a true student of organizational behavior. And we look forward to staying in touch. I hope you'll agree to do that.
Yeah, no, I would love it. And thank you so much, Richard, for the time and the conversation. I enjoyed it as well.
Lovely. We'll see you again soon.
Okay.